Thank you very much, and thank you all for attending. What I'd like to do in the next couple of minutes is just to frame the concept of critical neighbors and where do we come from. When people look at from the outside, look at the Israeli-Palestinian arena and the Arab-Israeli arena writ large, attention is mostly focused on what's happening between Israel and Palestinians, primarily, unfortunately, alas, because of violence, or on the Abraham Accords signatories, because it is so sexy and it is new and it is so glitzy and it looks so good. And all too often, the two main players, Jordan and Egypt, are overlooked in the analysis. Jordan and Egypt are not only the pioneers of striking peace treaties with Israel. Jordan and Egypt are, as the title indicates, are Israel's critical and strategic neighbors. I will not belabor the point beyond just pointing out that the security relationship between Israel and Jordan on the one hand, and Israel and Egypt on the other, are beyond imaginable a decade ago and maybe even 5 years ago. Egypt's role in the Israeli-Palestinian arena has received a lot of credit for mediating crisis prevention, and more visible role in mediating cessation of hostilities when they erupt, as was the case just a few days ago. Again, it was Egypt that led the story. Jordan's role is less, has attracted less public attention, even though it is enshrined in the peace treaty, where Israel and Jordan agreed that Jordan will have a unique role and standing when it comes to holy sites in Jerusalem. Jordan's relations with the Palestinians are unique. People share family ties. Jordan has been a major advocate of Palestinian rights and independence over the decades. Both Jordan and Egypt paid price for standing up to Palestinian rights in rounds of wars before we struck the peace treaty. And the two of them are critical for everything that is likely to happen, bad, unfortunately, but mostly for good, between Israel and the Palestinians. So in IPF, we decided that somebody has to shed the light on these two critical partners, critical players, strategic partners, and that's where the project came about. We were very lucky that we managed to mobilize three brilliant partners for the project. An Egyptian, a very experienced diplomat, a highly respected scholar and thinker, Hisham Yusuf, a Palestinian also, an analyst practitioner who served both the Palestinian Authority and the American administration in various roles related to the issue that we are talking about, Ibrahim Dalalche, and of course, the star of our evening, Farah Bdour. What we do is, we talk among ourselves, we identify a topic that is worthy of exploring and presenting a view on, and then we come up with a memo that reflects 4 individual different perspectives on the same issue. The most recent one is forthcoming, and where the 4 of us are struggling with the question of after Gaza, what next for the Israeli-Palestinian story? And with that, I will pause. Thank you.
Excellent. So thank you so much. Turning back to Farah, let's dive into some more specific items. With a substantial portion of Jordan's population being of Palestinian descent, it's no secret that Jordanians and Palestinians are very closely connected. Is there popular resistance to Jordanian-Israeli relations? And what are the root causes of this? Additionally, how has this impacted Jordan's ability to move the needle on the Israeli-Palestinian issue? And what will it take for those attitudes to change?
Thank you, Mariana, for this question. I think it's very good to start to analyze Jordanian-Israeli relations, which is being largely factored by the internal dynamics. And as you mentioned, Jordanians and Palestinians are deeply connected. There is a large segments of our population are youth, most of whom they were born after the Oslo, after the peace treaty. They never fought a war against Israel. They saw the failure of the negotiation path. We are talking about a highly educated population, most of whom have digital access, which really redefines geographical and narrative formation, and even the ability to form solidarity movements with the Palestinian. There is a popular resistance toward open up to Israel, of course, for so many reasons. First, Jordanians are outraged over violations of human rights in the occupied territories. They are angry about what they perceive as the West double standards when it comes to the Palestinian issue. So first and foremost, it's a moral issue for them. And on the other hand, they see Israel settlement policy under both left and right-wing government as a testimony of Israel, true intention of killing the two-state solution, which serves Jordan's national interest. And this is a solution that this platform is advocating for. On the other hand, Jordanians are astonished that even after signing the peace treaty with Israel, you still have Israeli writers and officials still entertaining the idea of turning Jordan into a Palestinian state, and not to mention provocations by Jewish extremists and the last decade of Bibi's very provocative government and leadership. So yes, the answer that there is many reasons that shape the attitude of Jordan public toward Israel. But how is this public attitude is impacting the ability of Jordan to influence the Israeli-Palestinian issue? I think when it comes to the Palestinian conflict, both the public and leadership are in full alignment about the priority of the Palestinian issue and the need to adamantly address it and support the Palestinian people. Now, of course, there's differences of opinion of how to support the Palestinians, whether Jordan should adopt a more assertive or aggressive policies to Israel, or there is questions about whom to engage from the Palestinian side, etc. But these discussions fall under a clear, unquestionable agreement that resolving the issue is in Jordan's top priority. So throughout history, Jordan was adamant in supporting the Palestinian people. It was Jordan that made a peace process in Madrid in 1991 possible by providing an umbrella for the Palestinians to negotiate with Israel in the first place. And it was Jordan that has been the most supportive of the Palestinian people in their quest for recognition and assertion of their political and national rights. So you could see that whenever the leadership and Jordanian officials are present in international stage, whether we're talking about the American Congress or the European Parliament, the recent summit in Jeddah, you can see that they advocate for the Palestinian issue. And even the recent current bid for the Palestinian statehood is being supported by Jordan. But Jordan has been always supportive of the Palestinian people, but it has been supportive of the Israeli people as well. by being the force of reason in this region. During the past decade, when Israeli politics was dominated by a very provocative and self-interest politicians, Jordan's wise diplomacy spread the region more instability. And Jordan, standing up for Trump's deal of the century, gave a clear message for regional players that their policies are risking the safety of the Palestinians and Israelis as well, and the future of a two-state solution. So Jordan did not manage to move the needle forward, but it certainly managed to prevent it from going back.
Thank you. So as you had mentioned, relations between Jordan and Israel were definitely strained under the various Netanyahu governments. How would you characterize the current state of Jordan-Israel relations under Prime Minister Bennett and now Lapid? And how do you see those relations moving forward?
Well, as we wrote in our previous piece, you could hear a big sigh of relief when Bibi left the government. Like the Jordanians were very happy that they don't have to deal with his lack of understanding to the Jordan's strategic role in preserving peace in the region. As you know, in the past decade, there was no high-level strategic talks between Jordan and Israeli leadership, and connections were maintained at a tactical level by mid-level staff. And right now, when Jordan is observing what's going on and with the electoral cycle, there is some concerns about, Bibi going back to the picture. And what is concerning that the challenges that Jordan is facing right now is tremendous. And these challenges demand a strong coordination and cooperation on the highest level possible. Coming out of 2 years of Corona, all economies in the region are struggling. Oil and gas prices are pushed to the highest level. There is a crucial need to address food security and facing water crisis and the influx of refugees. Then you have threats of militant groups on the Jordanian borders, which really puts stress on our security forces. And within this context, Jordan needs to face these threats while also implementing its ambitious political and economic modernization vision, according to which Jordan hopes to create 1 million job opportunity in the next 10 years. It hopes to double the GDP and expand the middle class and improve the living conditions for all Jordanians, and most importantly, increase youth participation in political life and decision-making. And this vision depends on rehabilitating the damaged trust between the state and people and somehow deliver quick wins. There is a need for delivering quick wins. So this is a very critical time for Jordan. So in a scenario where you have another flare-up in Al-Aqsa or another war in Gaza, adding to the mix a provocative Israeli leadership like Bibi's, or a leadership that really do not understand and appreciate the strategic importance of Jordan, it's very easy to predict how this will interplay domestically, given the challenges that Jordan face, and how the ambitious vision will be interrupted. So Jordan is interested to have an Israeli leadership that you can actually build relationships with. And you can see that once Bibi was out of the pictures, meeting on a high level were resumed. And just recently, Prime Minister Lapid met with King Abdullah. And I would say one way to read this resumption of diplomatic ties on this level, that the Jordanian leadership is signaling to the Israeli people its preference. Now, did the Israeli public pick up these signals or not? I don't know. Maybe this is an issue that we need to investigate more with the IPF. And from our side, we need to answer the question of whether it is in Jordan's best interest to engage with the Israeli public or not. And if the answer is yes, what is the nature of this engagement? What kind of messaging that Jordan can be sending? There's a lot, of course, of calculations to answer these questions. How will the Israeli public be receptive to these messages from Jordan? How will it interpret these messages? And when we are talking about the Israeli public, which group we are talking about? Are we talking about the Arab Israelis, or are we talking about the Jewish Israelis? There is a lot of division within each group, which makes it hard to design an engagement policy or form a message for one group that it won't backfire on the other. And the most important question, how will the Jordanian public view any attempts to engage with the Israeli public at any level? And on the side, from my personal view, I'm also curious to investigate and know the role of the American youth who have connection to Israel in this whole mix. So, as I said, the relationship with the new government is much better from a Jordanian perspective, and there's concerns about returning of Netanyahu or Netanyahu-like government to the arena. And this is, of course, not in Jordan's best interest. And the question is, in the next month, what is the wisest policy for Jordan to make sure that a Bibi's-like government will not, come back to the scene?
Excellent. Thank you so much. You touched on this a little bit, but the water energy deal between Israel, Jordan, and UAE was a major step in regional cooperation. We know that water and energy diplomacy is critical for people who are living in a place. What we'd like to know as an organization in this conversation is, has anything come of this deal yet that you've seen? Then if not, why do you believe that is? And then in what ways, if any, do you see this agreement benefiting the Palestinian people?
Well, to be honest, I'm not really that informed about the MOU and the deal so far. But last time I checked, the deal is still in the feasibility stage, so nothing tangible came out of it yet. But I think the most important thing that came out of this deal is the interdependence model it represented. Previous deals were criticizing Jordan for put vital and strategic sectors in the hand of another state. And of course, for dealing with an occupying power. But beside that, one of the arguments that were presented is that you do not put your national interest in the hands of another country. And what this deal brought to the table is a model that somehow balanced the power asymmetry between parties and creating a healthy interdependence. Originally, when EcoPeace presented the study, the idea was that Israel would meet its Paris climate commitment to increase the renewable energy by 30% by the year 2030, I remember. And Palestine would establish desalination plants in Gaza. And by that, it will become a water exporter to Jordan and perhaps the Negev in Israel. And that will create more independence from Israel to meet its water and energy needs. Jordan, on the other hand, would achieve water security at cheapest cost through the purchase of Israeli and Palestinian desalinated water and become a major exporter of green energy, not only for Palestine and Israel, but also for the region as well. Obviously, Palestine is not part of the deal. But I think it's only rational that when the feasibility study phase will conclude, Palestine will be a natural party to include. And maybe this is a good question to ask Ibrahim, in the next weeks about whether the Palestinian position change or not.
Thank you. A final question for our discussion before we take questions from the audience. As Max said, please do leave your questions for Farah in the chat. What do you see as the impediments for and the best ways for Palestinians to be included in the growing process of regional normalization?
Well, I think the best way is to avoid falling in the trap of economic peace and the negative stigma of economic peace, and work on linking regional normalization to political deliverables on the Israeli and the Palestinian side, or at least creating a political horizon for both Israelis and Palestinian people, and show how regional normalization will actually bring more stability for Israelis and pour into the Palestinian state building and preserving human rights. Otherwise, we are going to repeat the same, mistakes. Any deals will lack public support. It will feed into the extremist narratives, and you create more apathy and resentment, and ending up creating more harm than good. And to avoid this trap, I think the Jordanian are proposing a formula under which the political track won't be replaced, but until the moment is ripe, regional economic integration will be used as a vehicle to build confidence and create environment conducive to resume peace talks. Now, this is not a new idea, but what is new is the vibe in the region, where it seems that after 2 years of COVID, there is a realization that cooperation is a necessity to meet the challenges, especially in energy and environment and food, water, and medicine security, and as well as other vital sectors. And Jordan has been discussing the creation of regional resilient pacts and capitalizing on existing ones. Jordan has a trilateral cooperation mechanism with Egypt and Iraq, as well as with Greece and Cyprus. There is also an ongoing cooperation with Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. And by principle, Jordan is open for cooperation in any mechanisms that will use and will use its presence at these mechanisms to include Palestinians in any regional project and work in focusing on the Palestinian state building. But again, Jordanians are vocal in saying that any regional integration in any normalization deals will not and should not be replace the political track.
Thank you so much for that. So we have a couple of questions so far. The first one is, how does Jordan view the PA's policy of rejecting Arab states' normalization with Israel? Does it believe that the Abraham Accords can indeed be leveraged to promote two states? And what is Jordan's approach to push for Palestinian inclusion in that process?
Well, originally, I think all Arabs believe in the Arab Peace Initiative, that first you need to solve the Israeli-Palestinian issue in order to have normalization with the Arab states. Even like there's a lot of lessons that we could learn from the recent Abrahamic Accords, because at the beginning there was a lot of fire and smiles and these beautiful ceremonies, but at the end of the day, when all of these ceremonies end, you have to deal with the reality of the public perception of these deals. Jordan definitely prefers the rationale of the Arab Peace Initiative, that first you deal with the Palestinian issue and then peace will follow. I think it also supported the Palestinian position in rejecting the normalization deal. But at the end of the day, as I was saying, it happened and it took place. So the rationale right now is how to use these normalization deals to build the trust and work on building the Palestinian state and creating a good atmosphere that is conducive to resumption of the talks, and use it as a confidence building measure. But at the end of the day, Jordan believes that there should not be any replacement of political tracks.
Thank you. Another question, how do Jordanians react to upticks in heightened tension and clashes/casualties between Israelis and Palestinians? Do the government and general public react in similar or different ways?
Well, in the recent incidents, it reacted almost in a similar way. You know, the government reflected the anger in the Jordanian street. I think, and it shows the frustration of both the government and the public that this cycle of violence is not being interrupted. And Jordan is genuinely interested in resolving the conflict and having security for both Palestinians and the Israelis. So in the last incidents, it reflected the pulse of the street. Yeah.
Excellent. There's a statement before a question. So,
and by the way, I was going to say that I'm not only interested in a question, I'm also interested in hearing analysis or maybe recommendations for things that we should done or should not do. I love to engage with the participants and hearing their you know, their views about everything, not only like having questions.
Great. The statement is that Jordan should not intervene in the Israeli election. And it says it's not our mission as Jordanians to influence the Israeli voters. Otherwise, we might expect backfire. Do you agree with this?
As I said, there's a lot of questions. I'm really like the political analyst in me is very curious to investigate this issue further, and maybe this is a piece that we can work on it in the future, because there's a lot of you know, questions that need to be answered, and there's a lot of games that it's going, whether inside the Israeli public or inside the Jordanian public, and even the Jewish diaspora. So there are many games that it's being interplayed at the same time, and from an academic point of view, I really want to investigate them more and see the ramifications on that. But I don't know, but I'm someone who always believed in engagement, but maybe this engagement should be catered carefully and thoroughly and thoughtfully before you know, give it and put it in a policy recommendation.
Great. Can you tell us more about your work with Seeds of Peace and your experience there?
So I started working with Seeds of Peace in 2014. I fell in love with this organization because I realized the important job that they are doing. They focus on bringing Arab and Jewish youth from conflict zone and provide this space for them to engage in critical conversations about living in this region, and provide this opportunity for them to vision a new future, a new shared future. And what I love about this organization, that it learns a lot from mistakes, because in the past, I think we admitted that we implemented a lot of models that really did not acknowledge the power asymmetry between the different groups. And then we start working on addressing that issue. But again, in a very subtle way that avoid escapism and resentment from the dominant power groups. But personally, I feel that this is the future. I don't believe in boycott. I don't believe in not engaging with the other, with the other, no matter how do you define the other. And I think this is the only way that you can build a trust and have a dialogue and move forward. Other than that, we're gonna keep on repeating this cycle, being caught in this cycle, and we need to break it at some point.
Great. Do you think that has influenced your work with the critical neighbors?
Definitely. Nimrod knows how much. Definitely, because at the end of the day, when you're working in think tanks and you're developing policy recommendations, you can do that as much as you can. But at the end of the day, if these policy recommendations did not resonate with the largest segment of the population, which is youth, both in Israel and Palestine and Jordan, your recommendation does not have a real value. And most of the time we resort to youth and having this conversation with them about whether the policy recommendations that we produce, or is it sound, does it make sense? What do you think of it? And they always have these brilliant, amazing ideas. They're very smart. And they can see, through the political games, and they actually provide a lot of knowledge and insight. And I feel like a very fortunate person to have the ability to work in the think tank sector, but at the same time having connections to the young people, because most of the brilliant ideas, it's come from them. And I always give them the credit for it.
That's great. Another question. How has Jordan been impacted by the war in Ukraine? Did it find itself stuck between two powers in a similar way that Israel has?
Well, for a lesser degree, definitely is not like Israel. Jordan, in fact, preferred the Russian, presence in Syria, because it kept, the situation calm. And once the Russian, pivoted away and gave, they concentrated in other parts of the world, it gave the rise for militant groups in southern Syria to be more active. So I think from a Jordanian point of view, Russia, they saw the Russia presence in Syria as a calming factor. I don't think it caught up, because Jordan's position from the West is and relationship with the United States is strategic and firm, and it has been doing going on for years. But the only thing that was impacted, of course, like the rest of the world, it's the rise in energy prices and the chain of supply and the supply of wheat. Fortunately, Jordan had reserves for wheat for the next 2 years, but still it's impacted like the rest of the world with the high energy prices and of course not to mention that after 2 years of COVID, these prices really had an impact on that. People started to feel very, very hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hit hard everywhere. And it's sad to hear that, it's just so uniform. Mm-hmm. So additionally, in the field of global geopolitics, has China made any inroads into Jordan to leverage its growing influence in the region?
I don't think so. But the relationship with China has been good and strong. And I think this is part of the Jordanian diplomacy, that it has a lot of friends. It does not make enemies. My understanding that China made a lot of investment with the Arab world, and actually the Arab partners like Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, they are one of the Chinese top trading partners. But again, like even if there were like refreshment somehow, I will not call it refreshment, but even if there were like a project that is implemented in Jordan by the Chinese, it is seen as a way of improving improving the economic situation, but not in any way pivoting away from the American and Western allies.
Great. Another question: how is the tension over the Allenby Bridge impacting Jordanian-Israeli relations? I believe some changes had been announced during Biden's recent visit, and have any of those changes been made?
There were tensions over the number of Palestinians who could cross the Allenby Bridge. And this is an issue that's been covered by the Jordanian press extensively. It is being seen as a way for Israel to, pressure Jordan There are talks about using this pressure to operate the Ramon airport in the south, and encourage Palestinian to use this airport and instead of using the Jordanian route. And again, this has created a lot of mistrust, and within the context, the political context that we are in, there was a lot of I read a lot of articles that accuses Israel of trying to damage, the relationship with Jordan. There are no, I would say, new measures that have been implemented, but we'll see how they're going to resolve this conflict in the next, maybe with a new leadership in Israel. Yeah.
We'll see. We hope. So what next steps does Jordan see as feasible to incorporate Palestinians into the Abraham Accords? Mm-hmm. If, for example, Saudi Arabia were to join the Accords, what concessions on the Palestinian front do you think are sufficient for Israel to make?
Interestingly enough, that the Saudi officials have been very clear that there will be no relations with Israel until there's some progress on the Israeli-Palestinian side, and the Jubair, the Saudi foreign minister, have reiterated that Saudi Arabia is still committed for the Arab Peace Initiative. But as I was saying, the only way is for Jordan to advocate for is to work on building a new building trust between the parties, and pressure and create this international pressure on both parties to come back and engage in the peace talks. And there is nothing will replace the political track, and any integration of economic project or else is used by Jordan through this lens as a way to build confidence between the two parties.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate you taking your time to speak with our group today, and for all of the work that you do and your commitment to peace in the region. We also want to say thank you to our community members for those insightful questions. I'm going to turn it over to IPF Atid Program Associate Max Webb for some organizational announcements. Thank you again.
Before going to Max, I want to say that I really I'd be more than happy to continue this conversation with the young generation, and I'm more than happy to share my contact information with them. And if they have other questions and other comments and other ideas that they want to share with me, I'm more than happy to find time to talk and engage with them.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Farah, for that. We'll make sure that our community members have access to you, and we'd love to continue engaging. We really, echoing what Marina said, thank you for the work that you do in the region and the work you do with us at IPF Atid. And thank you, Marina, for being a fantastic moderator today. I put a few links in the chat to talk about some upcoming events. As you'll note, this is a series. So we have our next Critical Neighbors event on August 30th. We're going to be talking about the Egyptian-Israeli relationship with Hesham Youssef, our Egyptian task force member, which is going to be another fantastic event. Also be on the lookout for local programs for young professionals happening in your community. Most excitingly, we have a brewery briefing in San Francisco with our IPF Atid San Francisco chapter next Thursday on August 25th. I'm going to be there. We're briefing with Dr. Masua Sagiv, who is a fellow at the Hartman Institute in San Francisco and also at the Cora Institute at Berkeley Law. That's going to be a fantastic event. So if you know anyone in San Francisco that you want to send our way, feel free to send them the RSVP that I threw in the chat. And then finally, if you don't follow us on social media, if you don't subscribe to our emails, please do. That's how you stay up to date about programs happening in your community, other fantastic virtual national programs like this one that we just had with Farah, and all of the other wonderful programs that we offer at IPF Atid for our young professional community in North America. With that, thank you again, Marina. Thank you again, Farah. Thank you, Nimrod, for the opening remarks. And we will see you soon at our next Critical Neighbors event. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Shukran.